Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today we're learning Seftas Batra Daf Yud Zayin. We're going to begin on the very bottom of Tes Zayin Amud Beis, last line. Tanur Shloisha Hitimah Kadosh Baruch Hu Hazeh Me'eno Olam Haba. There are three people in this world who are able to at least get a taste of what Olam Haba is. Of course, when you eat something, it's complete, but a little taste, a little something. And who are these three people? As we continue in Zayin B'Aleph, Aleph, that were Me'eno Olam Haba, Elohein Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov. Abraham dechsev be Bakol, Yitzchak dechsev be Mikol, Yaakov dechsev be Kol. So we know that in Berachas Hamazon we say Bakol Mikol Kol, which is Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov Bakol Mikol Kol. That is alluding to the three psukim as Rashi tells us. By Abraham, it says Vashem Berachas Abraham Bakol, which, as we saw in yesterday's daf, that could mean he had a son, he had a daughter, many other answers. B'Yitzchak ksiv v'oichel mikoil, that he ate from all. B'Yaakov ksiv v'chiyesh likol koimer l'chasru shim taiva. I'm not missing anything. So it's an interesting. Obviously, there's a connection if you study what those three psukim are referring to: having children, being given everything, not lacking, feeling completely content. These are ways that a person can have a sense of Olam Haba. Okay, weiter. So it's only these three, and that's the blessing of Bakol Mikol Kol, again, that we say in benching. Okay, Yitzchak dechsev be Mikoil, Yaakov dechsev be Kol. Shloi shait behen Yitzhahara. There are three people in which the Yitzhahara has no shlita over at all, no control. And who are them? So, Elohein Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov dechsev behu Bakol Mikol Kol. So it's interesting. The Bakol Mikol Kol, there's no Yitzhahara, because if you have everything, so what is your Yitzhahara? What are you desiring? What are you trying to go after? You have everything, so that's it. You're fine. The Yesharim of David HaMelech actually could be in this category. Except V'libi Chol B'kirbi, and my heart is dead inside, which basically means my Yitzhahara has died within me. So that's how some people add. The Idach, one who does not add David, it's Sarihu Deka Matger. All he's doing is mentioning pain. Says Rashi Alibo Mamishu Misraim V'Omer Shemes B'Kirbu Miroiv Tsaros. He's just saying that so much anguish, so much difficulty. But that doesn't have anything to do with the Yitzhahara. If we look in Taisus over here, Ein Lefar Shlashot Klal. It has to be that there is a Yetzirah, because if they're like robots, so they have no Bechira. So obviously they had to have it. It says Gemara in Yoma, Tos quotes, Yishmor, Kivan She'avar Adam Roiv Shanaisav. Once a person lived the majority of their life, once you've reached the point of no return, so you've already reached Ruba Kakulo, you've already reached the majority of your life, that you're doing a certain thing, you're not going to change. They do so much effort to distance from sin, then so Hashem assists them in that matter. Ryan Taisus. Okay, Tanurban. So there were six that the Melech HaMavos had no shlit over. Ve'elohein, and this is a little bit difficult because we said the Yitzhahara is the Melech HaMavos, the Satan is this. They're all three the same. Elohein, Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov, Moshe, Aharon, and Miriam. So Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov, they said Behu Bakol Mikol Kol. So the Melech HaMavos had no control over them. Says Rashi, El Mesu Neshika Al Pi Shechina. They died, but it was Al Pi Neshika. It was like a kiss of death, the most gentle way of dying. Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam, Dechsibahu Al Pi Hashem. It was Al Pi Hashem. It was like Neshikas through the mouth. Ayvah Miriam Luksiv Ba Al Pi Hashem. So Rabbi Lezer Miriam Namam Neshika Meis. She also died that way. Diasa Hashem Shom Moishel and Gezer Shava. Then Malu and Emor Ba Al Pi Hashem. Shikanai Hadavar Loimar. It just doesn't sound nice because we're dealing with a woman. So even though Kodesh Baruch Hu is not a man, but it doesn't sound proper. So even though that is true, it wasn't stated in that manner. Tan Rabbanan. Shiva loisholt bahen rima v'toileya. 7, the rima toleya had no shlita over. Velhin Avram of Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam, who Binyamin ben Yaakov, and includes over here Yaakov's son Binyamin. Avram of Yaakov dechsebahu bakol mikol. Moshe and Miriam dechsebahu al pi Hashem. So why are we adding in Binyamin ben Yaakov? Binyamin ben Yaakov dechsev leVinyamin Omar Yadid Hashem Yishkan levetacholav, that you shall rest with confidence. So, therefore, that's what it's referring to. That's the drasha that he died without Rima of Toileya. So, why don't we include David? He was requesting it, but doesn't mean necessarily he was granted it. Look at Rashi before. Someone who is noshik from the Shechina, it's not proper that Rima v'Toileya should be dovuk to such a gov. Shahari ein harima ba el metipa mara hamitaftefes misakinai shel malchamaves. So again, what exactly that means, that it's only something which is directed by the malchamaves. But if HaKadosh Baruch Hu was the one who, al pi Hashem, removed this person's neshama, and that's how they died, then there's no shlita of the Rim of Toileya. The Tosfos doesn't ask this question, but we are aware that there are times in which the Gemara mentions people who were tested. For example, the Rashbi's son, Rav Eliezer, Rav Shimon, he was boidik himself, as we saw previously, that he wanted to make sure that he would have no shlita over this. And also the Gemara over there mentions another Tana that was boidik himself, and he had 3 different things that he fasted for, and El Chayra, that should be included as well. Okay, but there's no, Tosfos doesn't address that question as far as I see. Actually, let's look at Rashi. Tosfos actually does ask this question. Fakert. It's for some reason out of order. Tema l'rash b'dekul tzadiki nami de'emer b'shamas perka shoyel urkav atzmais kina mishesh kina b'liba atzmaisav near kovin v'shein kina b'liba ein atzmaisav markivin. So it's not true. It's not limited. These 7 people should be all tzadikim. V'yeshom d'yachol yishol yirkav v'yishlit b'rima. Kedibra b'mased Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Shimon. So quotes in Taka, the mice of Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Shimon, the nashik richasha meudne, that it actually happened that one, like a worm, did come out of his ear. That was something that did happen because he made one mistake of not speaking on behalf of Chacham, Talmud Chacham, that was disgraced, and he didn't speak. That was his punishment. But for the most part, their bodies are preserved, but not to the extent of these 7. Okay, again, the Ayin Tosfos. Okay, Tanurban. Arba Mesu be'etyai shel Nachash. There was 4 people that died, says Rashi, but Sasso shel Nachash, only because of the advice or because of the serpent in the Eitz Hadas. They shouldn't have died. There's 4 people that did not have any reason that they should have died. It's only because there was a decree on this world that everyone has to die. But the truth is, there are 4 people that were so great, and only 4 people apparently that are so great, that they didn't deserve to die. But they were died only because of the punishment, because of the Nachash. Velhin Binyamin ben Yaakov, Amram Avi Moshe, V'Yishai Avi David, V'Kila ben David. Now, this is an unbelievable thing, because it doesn't mention Avraham, doesn't mention Yitzchak, doesn't mention Yaakov. Instead, it mentions the son of Yaakov. It doesn't mention Moshe, but it mentions the father of Moshe. It doesn't mention David, but it mentions the father and the son of David. It's very unbelievable. Almost a ployim. Why not? So some people learn, no, if all these other cases were Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, or Bakumi Kol, then certainly it would also be Mesu B'Efta Shel Nachash. But the problem is it says Arba, which is mashma for not anyone else. So it's an interesting point, because maybe the idea is that when you are in a position of leadership, even a David Melch, even a Moshe Rabbeinu, even a Yaakov Avinu, it doesn't make any difference. That once you're in a position of leadership, you're going to end up making mistakes, or you're going to end up harming people. Asher nasi yechata, that someone who's a leader makes mistakes. It's not even their fault. But when you decide to make one decision in this direction, you're harming someone else in the other. So when it comes to a leader, it's impossible for them to be perfect. However, their children or their parents, they are shaykh to it. It's an interesting word. Now, the cool Gemara, all of this is through tradition. The pasuk explicitly mentions that Yishai was untouchable, really, for Misa. T'chsiv v'es Amasa. It mentions Amasa. Some of Shalom tachas Yoyev al Hatzava. So he was placed under Yoyev for the army. V'Amasa ben Ish u'shmoi Yisra ha-Yisraeli. That for Amasa there was a Ben Ish. His name was Yisra ha-Yisraeli. Asher ba el Avigail bas Nachash. That he was with Avigail, who was the daughter of a snake. Achle Seruya im David, the sister of Seruya, the mother of Yoav. V'chi bas Nachashi. So you understand, was Abigail really the daughter of Nachash? V'lo bas Yishahi dechsiv v'ach yoisehem Seruya v'Abigail. It says that their sister was mentions Abigail. So we see clearly that Yishai was the father of Abigail, not Nachash. Alabas mishemesob efter Nachash. When it mentions the word Nachash, it is referring to Yishai. But calling him a snake is not a bad thing. It means that it was only because of the Nachash that caused him to die. And therefore that's Meforish in the Crow, where the other ones are through tradition. Question 7. Ma nilmid gabi misas Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov minakasa behen bakel mikol. What do we derive from that? So one is shloshot behen malchamavas, shloshot behen rima v'toyleya. And I would also say we can also learn from here that they had made Olam Haba, but that's not Misas Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov. So that's why it's these two answers again, that there was no shlita of Rima v'Toilei, of these maggots and worms, and the Malch Mavas had no shlita over them. TB2. Mihem Arba Shaloi Shalot Behen Yetzahara. It's a great question. So who are these four in which Shalosh Shalat Behen Yetzahara? That the Yetzirah had no shlita over them. And I wrote the wrong answer. The answer, it's actually very interesting, because it says Shloisha Sholot Behem Yetzirah. Right? There's 3 in which the Yetzirah had no shlita over them. Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. I wrote Amram, Yishai, Khaled, Binyamin, and Yosef. I'm not sure what the correct answer is over here, because it's really not 3. It's only 3. And the Gemara, he says over, who are the 4? Shalosh Behen Yetzirah. Because the Gemara mentions 3 were not Shalot Yetzirah, and then it mentions 6 were not Shalot by the Malcham Avas. Goes from 3, 6, and then it mentions 7. Were not Shalot Rima v'Toilea. And then it mentions the only thing which is 4 is Arba Mesub Eftoy Shel Nachash. So it's a very difficult question, because I'm not sure if it was written properly. Okay. I'm just going to write incorrect question. Okay. So it's a little bit confusing what the correct answer is. That's TB2. Because really the answer is just Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. There's no way that's what they were looking for. They were looking for what I wrote, but that's not the correct answer based on the language of the question. Okay. Hadron alach hashutfin, hanalach hashutfin, hanalach hashutfin. We're now going to continue with the second parak of Bava Basra. Okay, there's only 10 prakim. We already did one, right? It's a long masechta though. A person is not allowed to dig a pit next to his friend's pit. And the idea is, you can understand, you have this big pit with a big hole, and then you dig it right next to someone else's pit with very little earth in between. It's going to make the other pit weak and collapse. And it doesn't matter what type of a pit. Shiach, ma'ara, which is like a square pit, amasamayim. I just look at Rashi. Bores out ugly round. Shiach is orach v'katzer, long and wide. Ma'aros, the cave, is makor b'kuria, which is it's covered up. V'loi nivreches kaivsin, and not a launder's pool. Says Rashi, it's l'chabis bigdehem, to launder garments. El im kin hirchik mekaisa chaver shloish tefachim, v'tzad b'tzid. It has to be 3 tefachim away from your friend's kaisel, and you also have to put lime on it inside. So it holds it together better. Why? It says Rashi, shechafira smuch labor, that when you dig next to someone else's pit, machleshes kaisle habor umarapaisa, it ends up weakening the walls of the pit and ends up weakening everything. And therefore you have to at least have 3 tefachim, what's called a foot of earth in between your pit and theirs. Apparently that's what it is, that's what it means. And then also to put sid around it. Okay, let's go back in the Mishnah. Gefes ves hazevel ves hamelech ves hatzid ves hatzaloyim mekaisel shechaver shosh tefachim. These also have to be separated. Gefes, which is the leftovers of olives, in addition to that, like fertilizer, salt, lime. Now, rock, Rashi says, avanim sha'ur yoitz behen, stones in which fire comes forth from them. Shekol elu kashal l'chayma shemoitzin hevel. These are things that produce a tremendous amount of heat, which is also going to be detrimental to walls. So when you do all these different things, you have to be 3 tefachim away from your friend's wall, because it's going to end up ruining their wall. Okay. And then it says, question, is this the proper girsa? Sud b'tzit. Plaster it with lime. Barchikenes hazroyim ves hamacharesha ves meiraglayim and a kaiser shosh tefachim. Also, one is supposed to distance from seeds. Says Rashi, kashin l'kaisel. They're also, when you plant, it's not good for the wall. When you're planting or when you're plowing, says Rashi, marpa es yisaidim anoifel. It ends up weakening the foundation. The well will potentially fall in, as well as meir and gavayim. These are all from. So again, you have to distance 3 tefachim away from their wall. Marchikin es harichayim shloishim min hashechev shein arba min harechev. So you have to distance the millstone 3 tefachim from the shechev, which it says Rashi hi harichayim hatachtain, the bottom piece, which is 4 from the rechev, which is hi elyoina. That's the upper part. Harecheves alzu, which rides, so to speak, on the bottom one. The rechev rides. That's why it's called like riding, because it's on the top of the shechev, the one which lies down. So the top one is a tefach more narrow. So therefore, that's the reason why the shechev has to be 4 tefachim, because it's wider, and that's what it means. So marchikin es richayim shloisha min hashechev shein arba min harechev. Yes, a tanur shloishim in a kalya, and you have to distance the oven 3 from the bottom part. Shehin arba min a safa, which is 4 from the edge. It says Rashi, tachtoni kori kalya, the ayoni kori safa. The top part is called the safa. Okay. So again, the idea behind this whole mission, as we continue now in the Gemara and Yud Zayin Beis, is that these are all forms of damages. That if you end up doing things even in your property, but it can affect someone else's property, then it becomes problematic. Now, pasuk babor masay b'kaisel. The Mishnah begins talking about damaging someone's pit, and then for some reason it shifts over to a wall. Listening Elohim kin hechem mebar shel chaver gimel tvach. So Rabbi v'itema Rabbi Yehuda. It means mekaisel boyer sheninu. It means the wall of his pit. So it's not, we're talking about two separate things. We're talking about the wall of your friend's pit. So listening, then why doesn't it say Elohim kin hechem mebar shel chaver gimel tvachim? Talk mashma the kaisel bar shlosh tvachim. It's coming to tell you that the wall of a pit is 3 tvachim. Nafkamina l'mekach l'memchar. This is specifically when it comes to mekach l'memchar, says Rashi. But my tani mekaisel baro, when it mentions the walls of the pit, l'manu ba shakaisel baro shel rishain milei kol shlosh tvachim. That we're talking about the wall of the first one was 3 tvachim. Shehuska gam hu harchik min ha-meitzar. He also needs to distance 3. In other words, what it's telling you is that when you have this boundary, he already separated 3 tefachim from your side. So now you also have to separate 3 tefachim from your side, which is mashma that it's not just 3 tefachim. That has to be basically 6 tefachim away. That's what it's going to tell you. Kedesanya. I'm selling you the pit and its walls. So the wall has to be 3 tefachim. Itmar habal wismayich matzad meitzar. Let's say I have a person that wishes to put his pit right next to the border, right? And therefore, you put the pit mamish right here, so on the other side it becomes problematic. Even, let's say, there's nothing there, we'll have to see. So, what's the din? Abaye oimer saimich. You could put your pit right next to the border, which is mashma even without the other pit there. Rabbi oimer eino saimich. Rabbi says, no, you cannot put your pit mamish right up against that wall. So, besada hasugla boides devir kol eino samich. So, since this field is made for pits to water the fields, so therefore there's no way you're allowed to do this, because if you put it right up against the border, you're causing harm for the other person who also wants to be able to have his own pit. Maybe he doesn't have one yet, but he would eventually want one, and that's going to make it difficult because you put it right up against the border. Keep pligi, so they don't argue that. You can't do that. So keep pligi. We're talking about a situation where it's not a sulaboros. It's not made for digging pits. So of course you should be able to, because what's the problem? You built the pit on your property, and your neighbor's property is not a sulaboros, so what's the whole problem? Rabbi Omer enu samich. Why not? Since you changed your mind, you decided to dig over there. Maybe I'm going to want to do the same thing. Some say no, but if a person is not going to be digging pits over there, so then certainly you could put your pit right up against the border. So by the Amri Marchikenes Ilim in a bor Eser v'chamesh Alma. Now he mentions that there, according to the Rabbanan, and let's look at Rashi, the Shaminim Adam Sarach Lichnes L'Tai Shaloi, person has to go a little bit into his own property, Kadei Shal Yazik as Chavero, so as not to damage your friend. It doesn't say, oh yeah, you can dig over here right next to your friend's trees. No. The Rabbanan say you have to distance the tree from the pit 25 amos, because you can understand, you put a tree all of a sudden it's going to grow roots. It's going to go and smash into your neighbor's property and into the pit and destroy their pit. So you have to plant a tree 25 amos away. That's the Rabbanan say. So maybe it's the same thing here. You're not allowed to dig a pit mamish right next to the border. So they say, even the Rabbanan say, it's because when the guy's planting the tree, the pit was already there. So therefore, you see that there's this problem. You can't plant the tree now right next to this other person's pit because inevitably it's going to grow roots and it's going to ruin this guy's pit. So that's why the Rabban say you have to distance 25 amos. In this situation, he should be able to put this pit right next to the border because the other guy doesn't have a pit. When it comes to a tree, you can plant your tree right next to this guy's pit. When you're planting the tree, yeah, maybe in 100 years or whatever, it may end up having huge roots and ruin this guy's pit. But right now, you're just planting a tree. You're not doing any damage. However, here, every single bang, every dig that you're doing, it's going to weaken my earth. So this is direct damage, and therefore Rabbi Yossi would not allow this since it's direct damage. So this is not something which would be acceptable. So that's perhaps the way to understand that. Okay. Let's look at this Rashi when it says Navkamida Mekach Memcher. Rashi says the Ukma Kishabo Lachbor Babasachas Sheshneim Huskukul Harchet Kol Echad Echad Shlosh Tefachim. It said if they both come at the same time, then each of them have to distance 3 tefachim. Okay, which we're going to maybe see that again in momentarily. So Tanan. Lo yachbor adam bor samach bar shel chavero. Our Mishnah says beferish that you're not allowed to put dig a pit next to your friend's pit. Now, time of the ikabor, which is mashma, the only reason why you can't do it is because the pit's right there. Halei kabor samich. Now, apparently, this is a raya that you could dig a pit right next to the border because your neighbor's property has no pit there. Now, if we're dealing with your neighbor's pit, neighbor's property rather, there's no person that digs pits. It's not a field that's for that purpose. That we can understand Posh in our mission is talking about why are you not allowed to dig this pit next to your friend's pit because your friend has a pit? Which is mashma, if a friend does not have a pit, you could dig it even next to the border because it's a field in which your neighbors in asula boros. That they argue there. So Abaye makes sense because Abaye says, like our Mishnah, you could be saimich, even though it's asula boros. Elo Rava kasha. How do we understand our Mishnah? If our Mishnah is talking about a case that it's a sui laboros, so then how are you able to, as our Mishnah is mashma, you can only not dig a pit there because your friend has a pit, which is mashma. If he doesn't have a pit there, then you are not allowed. You are allowed to do it, but that's not what Rava said. Rava said that eno saimich. Shamlach Rava ha'it marlo amar Abaye v'yitem Rabbi Yehuda mikaisel boidai sheninu. So what is that referring to? Meaning, even the first person must distance his pit from the border, even though no pit is on the other side, but there's a potential pit. So that's what the Mishnah is saying. You can't make a diak and say, oh, it's because there's a pit. Mashma, if there's no pit, then you could dig it. It's right next to the border. No, it means any place which is asur laboros, in which it's possible, mikaisel boidai, from where the friend may eventually want to build a pit. So because it's a potential pit, it's also a problem. Not just because it's there, but even if it's potentially going to be there. Okay. I can understand our Mishnah that it's talking about Mikoisel Boidoi. It's not that there was a pit there, but even if there's a potential pit, Divra Kolenu Saimich, that our Mishnah it must be some Masada Asula Boros, and because it's Asula Boros, even though the pit's not there, our Mishnah says you can't dig a pit there because next to the border is a problem, and everyone holds if it's Asula Boros according to this lashon. You're not allowed to be Saimach. That they actually argue, I can understand Rabbi because Rabbi says you can't do it. And that's what our Mishnah is talking about, because it's talking about a case of Mikoisel Boro, even for a potential pit. El Abaye, who says you can, it's a kasha. We're talking about a situation, normally, according to him, he says that you could do it. You could be Saimach. But the problem is, what if they're both coming at the same time? Here, Abaya says normally you can be Saimach, but when you're doing it at the same time, both need to distance 3 tefachim. That's what it means. Okay, let's see one more piece, and then we'll stop. Tashma. Sel haba biyadayim. If you have this bedrock that can come with your hands, which means that, as Rashi says, karkarach, this very soft earth. This person can dig a pit on his side. The other one can dig a pit on his side. So what does that mean? It says Rashi, Alma afal arisha laharchik, which is zeh marchik shlosh tvachim v'sad b'tzid v'zeh marchik shlosh tvachim v'sad b'tzid. So both of them have to distance 3 tvachim. So this is going to be a kasha according to Abaye. Abaye who says saimich. But here, it's clear that even if both of them are coming, the din is that they still have to distance each one 3 tefachim and put lime on it. So we see there's an issue that cannot be saimach. Right? Says, okay, but Bobby Yadayim shiny. As you said, this is a case where the earth is soft. So because the earth is soft, it's clear that it's more problematic, that it's already soft. So therefore, by digging around there, it's going to get worse. So therefore, even Abai will agree that Eno Saimech, if we're dealing with Karka, which is Sel Hababi Adayim. So 1 second. Okay. So the Ka'arila, my Ka'arila. It's actually mamish in the question itself that we're talking about soft earth. So what was the question? So Babi Yadayim is Richle. Sakadanamina Kivan de Babi Yadayim, since it's so soft, Liboinami Ravacha Tfei Kamashwan. You would think that the 3 tefachim each is not enough. You would think maybe 3 tefachim is just normal earth, but if it's soft earth, then maybe you have to distance yourself even further than that. So on that, the chiddush is, no, even there it's only 3 tefachim. They're going to stop there. Question 8. O yachbor el imkin hirchek mekaisel bayra shel chaver shlosh tefachim. So madua katani kaisel bayra shel rishain. It says mamish. Sounds like the guy already had his pit there. Halabaya diyomer rishon semech bayra lemeitzar leika kaisel lebor rishain. So his case was whether or not you can put the pit on the border, which is mashma that there is no other pit on the other side. Now our Mishnah is mashma that the whole issue is dafka because there is a pit there, which is mashma that there is no pit there, then everyone should hold that it's okay to put the pit there. So as we said, either we're talking about a sada hasula boidis. Actually, our Mishnah is talking about a case where even if there's no pit, but it's a potential pit, then everyone will hold you cannot be samich next to the border. We're talking about where they both came at the exact same time. So if they both came at the exact same time, so then in that's where Abai will that's where they will agree, or that Abai will agree that loy samuch, because it's not that there was a pit on one side, there wasn't a pit. They both want to be able to do it. In that case, they have to distance 3 tefachim. Okay, there's the same question as TA1. Ask the question a little bit differently. Habolismach batzada meitzar abayir mesamich. Eich zeh mesyashim. How do you answer this based on the Mishnah that says marchik mekaisel bar shenina v'hainu shigam arishan marchik? So o besada hasula bodai so hachlish nekliam inu samich o bevlo lachbor v'vasachas adkan.